At my birthday party, she thought it'd be funny to list new rules for me in front of everyone. When the laughter died down, I simply said, "I've got a rule too, you're no longer my wife." That night the guest stayed. She didn't. I should have known something was wrong when I walked into my own Dallas townhouse at 6:30 p.m. on my 35th birthday and found 12 women I barely knew sitting around my dining room table with wine glasses and appetizer plates. My wife Sophia stood at the head of the table like she was hosting some kind of board meeting, her wine club friends arranged around her in a perfect semicircle. I work as a cybersecurity analyst for a mid-sized consulting firm, and I'd been looking forward to a quiet birthday dinner at home after a particularly brutal week of client security audits. Instead, I was walking into what looked like an intervention. Perfect timing, Sophia announced, her voice carrying that artificially bright tone she used when she was up to something. "Ladies, my husband Nathan just arrived for his birthday surprise." The women turned toward me with expressions ranging from curious to predatory, and I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't a birthday celebration. This was a performance, and I was apparently the unwilling star. "Honey, why don't you sit down? I have the most wonderful gift for you." She gestured to an empty chair at the opposite end of the table, positioned like I was about to be interrogated. I stayed standing. "Sophia, what's going on here? I thought we were having dinner." "We are. But first, I have something special to share with everyone. Ladies, as you know, I've been working on reclaiming my power in this marriage, and tonight feels like the perfect time to establish some new boundaries." She pulled out a folded piece of paper with a flourish that made my skin crawl. "I've written up some new marriage rules that I think will help us both grow as partners." The wine club ladies murmured their approval, several nodding like this was the most reasonable thing they'd ever heard. I recognized a few faces from Sophia's social media posts: Amanda with her perfect blonde highlights, Rachel who never seemed to work but always had expensive handbags, and Jessica who treated every conversation like a therapy session. "Rule number 1, Sophia began, reading from her paper like she was delivering a graduation speech. "Nathan will share his phone location with me at all times and provide passwords for all social media accounts to ensure complete transparency in our marriage." A few women actually clapped. I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed quiet, curious to see just how far this was going to go. "Rule number 2, Nathan will convert his gaming room into my new art studio so I can pursue my pottery business full-time without distractions." More approving murmurs. The gaming room had been my sanctuary for 3 years, filled with custom-built PCs and equipment I'd saved months to afford. "Rule number 3, Nathan will contribute his entire quarterly bonus to funding my pottery business expansion while I transition away from my part-time gallery position to focus on my artistic growth." This got actual applause. My quarterly bonus was nearly $15,000, money I'd been planning to put toward our emergency fund. But Sophia was just getting started. And finally, rule number 4. Nathan will attend weekly marriage counseling sessions to address his controlling tendencies and learn to better support my creative aspirations. The room erupted in what sounded like genuine enthusiasm. "Sophia, this is brilliant." Amanda gushed. "You're finally standing up for yourself." "I wish I had your courage," Rachel added. "My husband would never agree to something like this." "This is exactly what modern marriage should look like," Jessica chimed in. "A woman reclaiming her narrative and demanding what she deserves." I stood there listening to these women celebrate what was essentially a list of demands designed to strip away my autonomy, my space, and my financial independence, all while framing it as Sophia's empowerment. The calculated nature of it hit me like a punch to the chest. This wasn't about our marriage. This was about public humiliation, about forcing my compliance through social pressure and witnesses. She'd invited these women here specifically to corner me, to make refusing her demands seem unreasonable and controlling in front of an audience who already saw me as the problem. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't recognize. The woman I'd married 5 years ago had been ambitious but considerate, creative but practical. This person standing before me was someone who thought theatrical manipulation was an appropriate way to communicate with her husband. "Well?" Sophia asked, her voice carrying that dangerous edge I'd learned to recognize. What do you think of your birthday gift? The room fell silent, 12 pairs of eyes watching me expectantly, waiting to see if I'd submit to this public display of dominance or prove myself to be exactly the controlling husband Sophia had apparently been describing to them for months. I walked calmly to my home office and retrieved my laptop, the same one I used for detailed cybersecurity audits that required absolute precision and documentation. When I returned to the dining room, I set it on the table and connected it to our living room TV with an HDMI cable I kept in the entertainment center. Since we're sharing information tonight, I think everyone should see the complete picture of our marriage, I said, pulling up the comprehensive financial spreadsheets I maintained for our household budget. The 65-inch screen filled with numbers that told a very different story than the one Sophia had been crafting. Ladies, meet our actual financial reality. I clicked through months of bank statements, credit card records, and expense tracking that I updated religiously every weekend. This is our monthly budget breakdown. Mortgage payment on this Dallas townhouse, $2,800. Paid entirely by me from my cybersecurity consulting income. Car payments for both vehicles, $1,100 monthly. Also covered by my salary. The wine glasses stopped moving. I continued clicking through screens of data, each one more damning than the last. Utilities, insurance, groceries, and household expenses, approximately $1,800 monthly. Again, funded through my income while Sophia works 15 hours per week at her friend's gallery, earning roughly $1,200 monthly by personal choice, not financial necessity. Amanda shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Rachel's perfect smile had completely disappeared. Now let's look at discretionary spending patterns over the past 6 months. I opened detailed credit card statements that showed every transaction, every purchase, every expense categorized and color-coded. Sophia's weekly art supply shopping sprees averaging $300. Monthly spa appointments at $150 per visit. Wine tastings and girls' nights averaging $400 monthly. I could hear Jessica's wine glass being set down harder than necessary. And here's my personal spending for comparison. Quarterly gaming equipment purchases averaging $200. Monthly gym membership at $49. Occasional lunch meetings with cybersecurity colleagues averaging $60 monthly. The contrast was brutal and undeniable. 90% of our household expenses covered by my income, while Sophia's earnings barely covered her personal entertainment budget. But wait, there's more. I clicked to a folder labeled Recent Financial Discussions and displayed screenshots of text message conversations between us. 3 weeks ago, I suggested we start saving for a larger down payment on a house upgrade. Sophia's response was that I was being financially controlling and stifling her creative growth. The screenshots showed her exact words. You're obsessed with money and planning. Some things are more important than your spreadsheets, Nathan. My art feeds my soul. 2 weeks ago, I continued, I questioned a $2,200 purchase for a pottery kiln when we hadn't discussed major expenses. According to Sophia, this made me emotionally abusive and proved I didn't support her dreams. More screenshots appeared showing her dramatic responses about feeling suffocated and unappreciated for wanting to invest in her artistic future. I turned to face the room full of women who had been applauding Sophia's empowerment speech just minutes earlier. Ladies, I work 55 hours per week in cybersecurity consulting. I handle all financial planning, home maintenance, and household management while funding both our lifestyles and Sophia's artistic pursuits. When I suggested basic budgeting conversations, I became controlling. When I asked about major purchases, I became abusive. The silence was deafening. I pulled up Sophia's social media posts from the past 3 months, screenshots I'd been saving without quite knowing why. And here's how our marriage has been portrayed to your social circle. Post after post appeared on screen showing carefully curated victim narratives. Feeling grateful for friends who understand what it's like to be married to someone who doesn't support your dreams. When your husband thinks spreadsheets matter more than your happiness. Finally learning to set boundaries with people who try to control your financial independence. Some people will never understand that art isn't just a hobby, it's a calling. Each post had generated dozens of supportive comments from her wine club friends, validating her portrayal of me as an unsupportive, controlling partner while I worked overtime to fund the very lifestyle she was using to paint herself as oppressed. So here's what tonight really was, I said, closing the laptop and looking directly at Sophia, whose face had gone completely pale. This wasn't about marriage rules or empowerment. This was about cornering me in front of witnesses to force compliance with demands you knew I'd never agree to privately. You needed an audience to shame me into submission. I turned back to her friends, most of whom were now avoiding eye contact. You've been cheering for someone who contributes $1,200 monthly to a household that costs over $6,000 to maintain, while working 15 hours per week by choice, not necessity. Someone who spends more on art supplies monthly than most people spend on groceries, then complains about financial control when asked to contribute to basic savings goals. Amanda finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophia, you never mentioned, we didn't realize, that she's been lying to you for months? That every story about my controlling behavior was actually me trying to maintain basic financial responsibility while she portrayed budget conversations as emotional abuse. The room felt like a tomb. Rachel was staring at her hands. Jessica had her phone out, probably calculating how quickly she could escape this situation. Sophia found her voice, but it came out as a desperate whisper. Nathan, please. Can we talk about this privately? We've been talking privately for months. Every conversation about money, about planning, about our future has been private. But you chose to make our marriage public tonight, so here we are. I opened a new folder on my laptop labeled Recent Communications and watched Sophia's face drain of what little color remained. Since we're being completely transparent tonight, let's discuss your artistic mentorship with Diego Ramirez. The name hit the room like a physical blow. Several women glanced at each other with recognition, and I realized they knew exactly who Diego was. I displayed the first screenshot, a text message thread between Sophia and Diego from 2 weeks ago. These are messages from your pottery instructor, the married man you've been meeting for private lessons. Her desperate voice cut through the silence. Nathan, those are just about art. Diego is helping me develop my technique. Really? I scrolled to a message dated 3 days ago where Diego wrote, "Meeting you has awakened something in me I thought was dead. My marriage feels like a prison compared to the freedom I feel with you." Sophia's response, "I know exactly what you mean. Nathan sees everything as a transaction, but you understand that art comes from the soul. I feel more alive in our 2 hours together than I do in entire weeks at home." The wine club ladies were now openly staring at Sophia with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. I continued reading their exchange aloud. "Diego, I've been thinking about leaving my wife. We could start fresh together, build the artistic life we both deserve." "Sophia, I dream about that too. Maybe after Nathan's birthday, when I establish these new boundaries, we can make it reality." Rachel audibly gasped. Amanda had her hand over her mouth. Jessica was quietly gathering her purse. But wait, there's more evidence of this artistic mentorship. I pulled up credit card statements highlighting specific charges. Dinner at Meridian Restaurant in Deep Ellum, last Saturday, $165. Table for 2. Sophia told me she was attending a solo art workshop that night. I clicked to the next charge. Wine bar on Elm Street, Thursday evening, $93. Sophia's story was meeting a potential gallery client. According to her location data, which she insisted I never check, she was there for 3.5 hours. More charges appeared on screen. Weekend pottery retreat at Lake Texoma, $412 for a couple's cabin rental. Sophia claimed this was a women's artistic retreat focused on advanced glazing techniques. The room was dead silent except for the sound of someone's chair creaking as they shifted uncomfortably. "And here's the most interesting part," I continued, displaying another message thread. "Diego recently separated from his wife of 12 years. According to these messages, their split happened right after Sophia and Diego's first private lesson in March. I read Diego's message from last week. Carmen moved out yesterday. She found the credit card statements from our dinners and the retreat booking. She says I can have my artistic soulmate because she's done fighting for a marriage I've already abandoned. Sophia was now visibly shaking. Nathan, you're taking everything out of context. Diego understands my artistic vision in ways that you never could. This isn't about romance, it's about creative connection. Creative connection? I pulled up their most recent exchange from yesterday morning. Diego, I can't wait to feel your hands in mine again during tonight's will session. The way you mold clay makes me want to reshape my entire life around you. Your response, being with you feels like coming home. I've never felt this understood, this cherished for who I really am. Amanda stood up abruptly. Sophia, I think I need to leave. This isn't what you told us was happening. Wait, please, Sophia pleaded, but Amanda was already moving toward the door. Rachel followed immediately, muttering something about not wanting to be involved in this situation. You told us Nathan was emotionally unavailable and didn't support your dreams, Jessica said, her voice sharp with betrayal. You never mentioned you were having an affair. It's not an affair. It's an artistic partnership that developed into something deeper. Nathan doesn't understand creative souls like Diego does. I displayed one final screenshot that ended any remaining doubt. This is from Diego's separated wife Carmen, who apparently found my contact information and sent me these photos last week. Pictures appeared on screen showing Sophia and Diego in intimate embraces at various Dallas locations, including one outside his apartment complex and another at an upscale restaurant I definitely hadn't paid for. Carmen wrote, I thought you should know your wife has been meeting my soon-to-be ex-husband twice weekly for private pottery lessons that don't involve any pottery. She's been using your credit card to fund their romantic dinners while telling Diego that you're emotionally abusive and financially controlling. The remaining wine club ladies were now actively backing toward the exit. Rachel paused at the door and looked back at Sophia with genuine disgust. We trusted you. We supported you. We actually believed you were in an emotionally abusive marriage. You made us complicit in enabling an affair, Amanda added, her voice cold. We've been cheerleading your victim story while you were cheating on your husband and using his money to do it. Jessica shook her head in disappointment. Some of us are actually married to good men, Sophia. We don't appreciate being manipulated into attacking someone else's husband based on lies. As her friends fled my dining room, Sophia's composure finally cracked completely. Nathan, I can explain everything. Diego and I never meant for it to happen this way. It just developed naturally through our shared artistic passion. Using my emergency credit card to fund your shared artistic passion? I was going to pay you back when my pottery business took off. With what money? You work 15 hours per week and spend more monthly on art supplies than you earn. She had no answer for that, because there was no answer. Her entire plan had been built on my continued financial support funding both her lifestyle and her affair, while publicly humiliating me into accepting even greater exploitation. I closed the laptop and looked at my wife, who was now sitting alone at what had been her triumphant birthday intervention just 30 minutes earlier. Well, since we're establishing new rules tonight, I've got one of my own. My voice was calm, steady, the same tone I used when delivering critical security assessments to corporate clients. You're no longer my wife. Sophia's eyes went wide with panic. Nathan, please, you can't be serious. We can work through this. I'll end things with Diego. I'll get a full-time job. I'll do whatever you want. I contacted a divorce attorney 2 weeks ago, I continued, ignoring her desperate protests. I've been documenting everything for months, waiting to see how far you'd take this manipulation campaign. Tonight exceeded even my worst expectations. The truth was, I'd suspected something was wrong since March when Sophia's behavior patterns shifted dramatically. As someone who analyzed digital security threats for a living, I recognized suspicious activity when I saw it. The secret phone calls, the unexplained charges, the sudden interest in pottery classes she'd never mentioned wanting to take. I'd been quietly gathering evidence while hoping I was wrong. You can't just end our marriage over a misunderstanding, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. 5 years together doesn't mean nothing. You're right. 5 years doesn't mean nothing. It means I wasted 5 years funding someone who saw me as a financial resource rather than a human being. I walked to the kitchen counter where I'd left a manila envelope earlier that day. I purchased this townhouse entirely with the inheritance from my grandmother's estate 3 years ago. According to Texas property law, inherited assets remain separate property unless specifically commingled. Since all mortgage payments, improvements, and maintenance have been paid from my income alone, this house is my sole property. Sophia's face went completely white as the legal implications hit her. What does that mean? It means you have 30 days to find alternative housing arrangements. You may take personal belongings you owned before our marriage or items you can prove you purchased with your documented income from the gallery. Everything else stays. I opened the envelope and pulled out documentation my attorney had prepared. Your name was never added to the deed, the mortgage, or any of the utility accounts. Legally, you've been my tenant for the past 3 years. The desperation in her voice reached a new level. Nathan, you can't throw me out with nowhere to go. I don't have enough money saved for deposits and first month's rent somewhere else. You should have considered that before spending your income on art supplies while using my credit cards to fund romantic dinners with your pottery instructor. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? I'd suggest calling Diego. I'm sure his artistic soul can provide the emotional and financial support you've been seeking. She flinched like I'd slapped her. You know that's not realistic. Diego is separated, not divorced. He's dealing with his own living situation. Then perhaps you should have thought about practical matters before building your future plans around an affair with a married man. I handed her the legal documents my attorney had prepared. These are the formal notices required by Texas law. You have 30 days to vacate. I suggest you use that time to make arrangements rather than trying to negotiate a reconciliation. Nathan, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. I'll go to counseling. I'll be completely transparent about everything. I'll cut all contact with Diego immediately. You're offering to do all the things a decent partner would have done from the beginning, but only after getting caught in a public lie and discovering there are consequences for your actions. I looked at the woman I'd been married to for 5 years and felt absolutely nothing except relief that this charade was finally ending. The marriage counseling suggestion is particularly ironic, considering you included it in your list of rules to fix my supposed controlling behavior. Turns out the person who needed counseling was the one having an affair while financially exploiting her husband. She tried a different approach, her voice taking on the manipulative tone she'd used with her wine club friends. You're angry right now, and you have every right to be. But destroying our marriage over one mistake isn't the answer. People can change, Nathan. I can change. One mistake. I pulled my phone out and opened the photo gallery. These are screenshots of your text conversations with Diego going back to March. 67 separate meetings, 23 dinners, 4 weekend getaways, and countless messages about leaving your controlling husband for your artistic soulmate. That's not one mistake. That's a systematic pattern of deception and betrayal. I was confused about what I wanted. Diego represented something exciting and new, but it wasn't real. What we have is real. What we had was real. What we have now is a legal arrangement that's being dissolved. I put my phone away and looked directly at her. Even if I could forgive the affair, I can't forgive the financial exploitation or the public humiliation campaign. You spent months portraying me as emotionally abusive to your friends while using my money to fund your romantic relationship with another man. I never meant for it to go this far. I just got caught up in feeling appreciated and understood in ways that I hadn't felt in our marriage. You felt unappreciated because I expected you to contribute to household expenses and questioned major purchases? You felt misunderstood because I wanted to save money instead of funding every artistic whim? It wasn't about the money. It was about feeling valued for who I am instead of what I could provide financially. The irony was staggering. Sophia, you literally called me your financial safety net. You demanded access to my quarterly bonus while working 15 hours per week by choice. Your list of birthday rules was designed to eliminate every boundary I had left while increasing your access to my income. She had no response to that because there was no response. Every defense she could offer only highlighted how completely she'd misunderstood the nature of our relationship. The divorce papers will be served Monday morning, I said, walking toward the stairs. I suggest you spend the weekend making practical arrangements instead of developing new manipulation strategies. Nathan, wait. Where are you going? To the guest bedroom. I'm done sharing space with someone who sees me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. As I climbed the stairs, I heard her calling after me, her voice breaking with desperation. This isn't how this was supposed to go. Tonight was supposed to fix things between us. She was right about one thing. Tonight had definitely not gone according to her plan. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The following week brought Sophia's increasingly desperate attempts to salvage her situation, each one more pathetic than the last. Monday morning, she called my office claiming I was having a mental breakdown and needed immediate intervention. My colleague Kevin transferred the call to me with barely contained amusement. Your wife says you've lost touch with reality and are making irrational decisions about your marriage. I explained the situation briefly, and Kevin just shook his head. Man, I've seen this before. My brother went through something similar. The desperation gets worse before it gets better. Tuesday brought a visit from 2 police officers responding to a domestic violence report. Sophia had filed a complaint claiming I'd threatened her and made her feel unsafe in our home. The officers reviewed my documentation, including the legal eviction notice and evidence of her affair, then advised Sophia that filing false reports was a criminal offense. Ma'am, your husband has followed proper legal procedures for separation. Having your belongings returned and being asked to relocate isn't domestic violence. Wednesday morning, I discovered Sophia had attempted to forge my signature on a home equity loan application for $45,000. The loan officer called to verify some discrepancies in the paperwork and income documentation. Mr. Nathan, the handwriting analysis flagged some concerns with the signature comparison, and the employment verification for your wife doesn't match our records. I immediately contacted my attorney, who had the application flagged as fraudulent and sent a cease and desist letter to Diego Ramirez. Apparently, Sophia had been consulting with him about securing funds to hire a high-profile divorce attorney who specialized in contesting prenuptial agreements and property ownership. The problem was, we didn't have a prenuptial agreement, and the house ownership was ironclad under Texas inheritance law. Thursday brought the news that Diego had completely cut contact with Sophia and returned to his wife Carmen. My attorney's letter threatening alienation of affection litigation had apparently motivated Diego to choose his marriage over his artistic muse. Carmen had agreed to reconcile on the condition that Diego delete all contact with Sophia and transfer to a different pottery studio across town. Nathan, Diego won't answer my calls. Sophia cornered me in the kitchen that evening. He's being manipulated by his wife and your attorney's threats. We had something real, something meaningful. You had an affair that's now ending the same way most affairs end, with everyone involved realizing the fantasy wasn't worth destroying their actual lives. You don't understand. What Diego and I shared transcended normal relationship boundaries. We connected on a spiritual level through our art. Spiritual connection funded by my credit card and conducted in hotel rooms I was paying for. She had no response to that particular observation. Friday brought Sophia's attempt to drain our joint checking account, transferring $8,000 to hire Patricia Blackwell, a notorious divorce attorney known for aggressive tactics and inflated fee structures. Unfortunately for Sophia, I'd been monitoring our account activity and had already moved our savings to individual accounts the previous week. The overdraft fees from her attorney retainer check cost her an additional $350. Nathan, you can't cut off my access to our money. I need legal representation. You have access to the money you've contributed to our joint account. Unfortunately, that amount is approximately $430 over the past 6 months. My attorney expedited our divorce proceedings when Sophia's lawyer attempted to contest the house ownership and demand spousal support based on her claims of financial dependency and emotional abuse. The judge reviewed our financial records, the evidence of her affair, and the documentation of her fraud attempt with obvious distaste. Patricia Blackwell withdrew from Sophia's case after reviewing the evidence and realizing there was no legal path to victory. By Friday evening, Sophia had exhausted most of her options and was facing the reality that her manipulation strategies weren't working. I found her in what used to be our shared bedroom, packing her clothes with mechanical precision. "I spoke with my sister," she said without looking up. "I can stay with her temporarily while I figure out my next steps." "That's probably wise. Julia always seemed like the practical one in your family. She's furious with me. Told me I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me for some fantasy that was never going to work out." I didn't respond to that observation, though I appreciated Julia's directness. Sophia's sister had always been skeptical of her impractical approach to life and relationships. "Nathan, I know you don't want to hear this, but I need you to know that I genuinely loved you. I just got confused about what I wanted from life. I believe you loved the version of me that paid your bills and asked no questions. You just didn't love the version that expected partnership and accountability." She paused in her packing, looking at me with something that might have been genuine regret. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me for how this ended?" "I'll forgive you eventually, because carrying anger serves no purpose. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Some things can't be undone. What if I got a real job? What if I proved I could be the partner you needed?" "Sophia, you're offering to become a different person to salvage a relationship you systematically destroyed. That's not love. That's panic." She finished packing in silence while I began the satisfying process of reclaiming my space. I converted her planned art studio back into my home office, complete with the gaming setup she demanded I dismantle. I installed new locks and changed all the passwords she demanded access to under her birthday rules. By Sunday evening, Sophia had moved out completely, taking only the belongings she could prove ownership of and leaving behind a house that finally felt like home again. I spent that night reorganizing furniture, setting up my workspace exactly how I wanted it, and ordering pizza while playing games online with friends I'd been neglecting during the final months of my marriage. For the first time in years, I went to sleep in my own house without calculating expenses, monitoring credit card usage, or wondering what manipulation strategy would greet me the next morning. 2 weeks after Sophia moved out, I received an unexpected text from Amanda asking if we could meet for coffee. I almost declined, but curiosity won out. She was waiting at a corner table in a downtown cafe when I arrived, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "Nathan, thank you for agreeing to see me. I owe you a massive apology." She slid a manila folder across the table. "Rachel, Jessica, and I put this together. We thought you should see what Sophia was really telling us about your marriage." The folder contained printed screenshots from their wine club group chat going back 8 months. Page after page of Sophia's messages painting me as emotionally abusive, financially controlling, and creatively stifling. "She told us you forbade her from pursuing art," Amanda said, her voice heavy with shame. "That you monitored her spending obsessively and made her account for every dollar she spent." I flipped through messages where Sophia claimed I'd screamed at her for buying art supplies, threatened to leave her if she took pottery classes, and demanded she quit her gallery job to focus on household duties. None of it had any basis in reality. "The truth is," I said, looking up from the fabricated conversations, "I offered to fund her master's in fine arts program last year. She never even submitted applications." Amanda's face crumpled. "Oh God. She told us you refused to support her education because you wanted to keep her dependent on you." Here's the actual conversation we had about graduate school. I pulled out my phone and showed her screenshots of text messages where I'd researched programs, calculated costs, and encouraged Sophia to apply. Her responses had been dismissive, "Maybe later when I'm more inspired," and "Graduate school feels too structured for my creative process." Rachel and Jessica arrived together, both looking as uncomfortable as Amanda. Rachel sat down heavily and immediately started apologizing. "Nathan, we are so sorry. We had no idea Sophia was lying about everything." "She made you sound like a monster," Jessica added. "Every story was about you controlling her money, isolating her from friends, or crushing her artistic dreams. I continued flipping through the group chat screenshots. Sophia had turned every reasonable conversation into evidence of abuse. When I'd suggested we create a joint savings account for vacation funds, she told her friends I was trying to monitor her spending. When I'd asked her to contribute to groceries, she'd claimed I was making her beg for basic necessities. The worst part, Rachel said, is that we encouraged her to stand up to you. We told her she deserved better treatment and should demand respect. You told her exactly what she wanted to hear based on the information she gave you, I replied. I don't blame you for supporting someone you thought was being mistreated. Amanda pulled out her phone and showed me more evidence. Look at this message from 3 months ago. Sophia wrote, Nathan got angry because I bought a $40 canvas. He said we can't afford my art supplies anymore and maybe I should get a real job. Do you remember that conversation? I remember asking her to check with me before making large purchases because we were saving for a house down payment. The canvas cost $40, but she'd also bought $300 worth of other supplies that same day without mentioning it. So you never told her to get a real job? Jessica asked. I suggested she might consider increasing her hours at the gallery if she wanted more spending money for art supplies. She was working 12 hours per week and complaining she couldn't afford the materials she wanted. The 3 women exchanged looks of pure mortification. Rachel spoke up next. She told us you were emotionally unavailable and never showed interest in her artwork. I attended every gallery show she participated in, helped her set up an online portfolio, and converted our spare bedroom into an art studio. I still have photos of her paintings hanging in my office. The birthday dinner, Amanda said quietly. She told us you never celebrated her achievements or made her feel special. She said that's why she needed to establish boundaries with you. I've planned elaborate birthday celebrations for her every year we've been married. Last year I surprised her with a weekend trip to Santa Fe specifically to visit art galleries and studios. Jessica looked sick. Nathan, she had us convinced you were this controlling, unsupportive husband who crushed her spirit. We thought we were helping her escape an abusive situation. The affair with Diego, Rachel added. She never mentioned him until recently, and even then she made it sound like he was just an art instructor who appreciated her talent in ways you didn't. I showed them screenshots of the romantic messages between Sophia and Diego. She was using my credit card to fund romantic dinners while telling him I was emotionally abusive. Your support of her victim narrative gave her the confidence to escalate her deception. Amanda was crying now. We feel so stupid. And so guilty. We attacked you at that dinner party based on complete lies. We made you the villain in a story where you were actually the victim, Jessica said. Some of us have good marriages, and we let Sophia make us question our own husband's behavior because her stories were so convincing. Rachel leaned forward earnestly. Nathan, is there anything we can do to make this right? We feel terrible about our part in enabling her manipulation. You can learn from this experience and be more skeptical when someone's stories consistently paint them as a perfect victim and their partner as irredeemably terrible. I closed the folder and looked at these 3 women who'd been weaponized against me through systematic deception. Most relationship problems have some shared responsibility. When someone claims their partner is entirely at fault for everything, that's usually a red flag. We should have asked more questions, Amanda admitted. Should have insisted on hearing both sides before taking such a strong position against you. Sophia is very convincing when she wants to be. She told you exactly what you needed to hear to gain your sympathy and support. As I walked back to my car, I felt oddly grateful for this conversation. These women had been manipulated just as thoroughly as I had, used as weapons in Sophia's campaign against our marriage. At least now they understood the truth, even if it came too late to matter. The divorce proceedings moved with surprising efficiency once Sophia's attorney reviewed the comprehensive documentation I'd provided. Patricia Blackwell scheduled a consultation with Sophia that lasted exactly 47 minutes before withdrawing from the case entirely. My attorney received a brief email. After reviewing the evidence and applicable Texas law, I cannot ethically represent Ms. Sophia in contesting property ownership or pursuing spousal support claims. I recommend she seek alternative counsel or consider immediate settlement. Sophia's second attorney, a recent law school graduate willing to take questionable cases, lasted 3 weeks before reaching the same conclusion. The inheritance documentation was ironclad, the affair evidence was overwhelming, and the financial fraud attempt made any sympathy claims impossible. When Sophia's third attorney suggested she accept my settlement offer, she finally grasped the reality of her legal position. The final divorce hearing took place on a rainy Thursday morning in downtown Dallas. Sophia sat across the courtroom looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, flanked by a public defender who'd advised her to accept the settlement terms without contest. The judge reviewed our documentation with obvious efficiency, having seen similar cases countless times before. Mr. Nathan, the court recognizes your sole ownership of the marital residence through inheritance. Ms. Sophia, you'll retain personal property purchased with your documented income, including art supplies and clothing. No spousal support will be awarded given the evidence of adultery and financial misconduct. The entire proceeding lasted 18 minutes. As we walked out of the courthouse, Sophia made one final attempt at reconciliation. Nathan, I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. I hope you learned something from this experience that helps you in future relationships. Do you think we'll ever be able to be friends someday? After enough time has passed. I looked at the woman who'd spent months systematically deceiving me while using my money to fund her affair. Sophia, friendship requires trust and respect. You destroyed both of those things beyond repair. 8 months later, I hosted my 36th birthday party at my renovated Dallas townhouse, surrounded by cybersecurity colleagues, actual friends, and family members who'd been worried about me during the final year of my marriage. The house felt completely different now, transformed into a reflection of my authentic interests and personality. My home office occupied the space Sophia had demanded for her art studio, complete with multiple monitors, a high-end gaming setup, and cybersecurity certification plaques covering one wall. The living room showcased a massive entertainment center with surround sound that I'd always wanted but never installed because Sophia found it too masculine for her aesthetic vision. This place looks incredible, my colleague Tom said, admiring the home theater setup. You've really made it your own. My friend David from college raised his beer in a toast to Nathan, who proved that sometimes the best birthday gift is discovering who your real friends are. The party included several people I'd reconnected with after my marriage ended, friendships that had withered under Sophia's subtle but persistent campaign to isolate me from anyone who might question her behavior or offer alternative perspectives. Sarah, a cybersecurity analyst from a competing firm, had become a regular presence in my life over the past few months. We'd met at a professional conference and discovered we shared similar values about work-life balance, financial responsibility, and genuine partnership. I love what you've done with this place, she said, examining the custom shelving I'd built for my book collection. It feels like someone actually lives here instead of it being a showpiece. That's exactly what I was going for. Functional, comfortable, authentically mine. Sarah understood my work in ways Sophia never had, often discussing cybersecurity trends and industry developments with genuine interest rather than treating my career as a boring necessity that funded her lifestyle. She paid for her own dinners, contributed equally to shared activities, and had never once asked me for money or financial support. The contrast was remarkable and refreshing. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I showed it to Sarah rather than hiding it or making excuses. "Who do you think that is?" she asked, reading the message. "Saw the photos from your party on Instagram. You look really happy. I hope you are." "Probably Sophia. She's been occasionally reaching out through different numbers." "Are you going to respond?" "No. There's nothing left to say." I deleted the message and put my phone away, returning my attention to friends who'd actually shown up to celebrate with me rather than manipulate me. Sarah smiled and squeezed my hand. "Good choice." Later that evening, after the last guests had left and we were cleaning up together, Sarah brought up something that had been on my mind. "You know what I find most impressive about your situation? You could have become bitter and cynical about relationships, But instead you learned from it and stayed open to something better. Bitterness would have meant Sophia won. She took enough from me. I wasn't going to let her take my ability to trust the right person. As we finished putting away dishes and organizing the kitchen, I reflected on how completely my life had changed since that disastrous birthday dinner. I'd been promoted to senior cybersecurity consultant with a substantial raise, joined a weekend cycling group that explored Dallas area trails, and developed friendships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. The house felt like home for the first time in years, filled with my interests, my choices, and my authentic personality. Sarah stayed over that night, and waking up next to someone who genuinely wanted to be there, who contributed equally to our shared experiences, and who saw me as a partner rather than a resource felt like the best possible outcome of the worst period of my adult life. My 36th birthday had been everything my 35th birthday should have been. A celebration with people who actually cared about me, in a space that reflected who I really was, with someone who valued me for the right reasons. Sometimes the greatest gift is discovering what you deserve, and having the courage to accept nothing less.